MHCC, in case anybody here doesn't know Ben. Everybody knows Ben, but just in case. We have several items on our agenda for today. We're going to hear an overview of a report from the performance work group on the topic of efficiency. We're going to discuss the PAC data analysis that we've been doing regarding the uncompensated care policy, and also updates on some of the things that were done to look at potentially different formulas. And then we're going to review a draft of the balanced update recommendation that will go out to the Commission for the May meeting later this week. That's the sum and total of what we're up to today. So, Julie, do you want to get us started with the efficiency?
Will be sufficient for hospitals to make the investments they need to demonstrate the long-term success under this model. And so, for the record, I'd just like to suggest that one area that the Commission staff look at is the 0.5% that is set aside for unforeseen adjustments, whether some portion of that could be provided for additional infrastructure investments under the global budget models. What I would say is, in terms of the model, is in fact, until that 0.5 is spent, that in fact the overall number that would actually be provided to hospitals is that 0.5% less. That's something that's being set aside, but you can't really say that we're spending that money until it's actually provided for those unforeseen adjustments. So all other things being equal, we go into the fiscal year July 1st with, in fact, expecting not 2.34%, but instead 1.84%. So that's why I would ask that we consider moving some portion of the unforeseen adjustment funding up into the infrastructure funding because of the uncertainty of whether that funding is sufficient. You can do that with then not impacting the overall number you have of 2.34%. It's just a more assured guarantee that we'd have perhaps better funding available for that infrastructure funding. But overall, I think this is a very reasonable approach that the staff has taken. I have to just compliment you and the staff for all of the transparency, the details, the backup you've provided on everything from how we're doing the population, the demographic adjustments to each of these different pieces here. I think it's to be commended for how vastly improved this process has been compared to the last 2 or 3 years that we've been involved with in discussing this update. And I do want to, for the record, again, put that compliment on record as well. So if you, again, as I said, the only other item that that I have is again just focusing on what we could do with that unforeseen adjustment.
Are there other comments or questions?
Anna, I just have a question. This is Kristen Polio. You did a comparison of a couple of numbers here. For example, you said that 3.07 on page 7 was less than the 3.96, and the 2.34% is less than the 3.22. Does that, can I interpret that to mean we may have a little bit of cushion if the difference statistic doesn't come in at 2%?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
So there could be. It also depends on how the DISH adjustment nationally plays through, and how the actuaries put that into the numbers. So I think we did grill the actuaries, but we might have another grilling session before the commission meeting, if possible, just to try to make sure we understand how they baked in the dish adjustment. But again, you know, how those Medicare numbers come in will be. We just don't know what the real utilization growth will be until it happens, and I think actuaries are better at hindsight than projections a lot of times. So that's always easier to make rear view mirror views than projections.
Can I ask, just for clarification, Kristen, you said if the different statistic didn't come in at 2%.
Yeah, so if we don't maintain a different statistic of 2.2%, could we still be okay, is basically what my question was.
Yeah, and I think your response is that there is some you know, safety, you know, distance there a little bit. But I guess the thing is, if the difference statistic is not maintained, yeah, I mean, that's why we have the cushion, a little bit of cushion built in, because I didn't want to get the impression that there was additional monies on the table. If we didn't maintain the 2%, we have to maintain the 2% in order to keep this. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. So there's a little bit of spread there now. There's a little spread there now, and there's also the 0.5. Right. So if, let's say that we come around to December and we're not quite maintaining the difference statistic, and we actually have enough data to figure that out. So that's point number 2. But we can figure out some data from our own Maryland data, because we are collecting Medicare separately, but it's not exactly the same thing as payment data. So let's say that we're not quite where we want to be on the difference statistic, but we haven't given out any of that 0.5 because Jerry's been very stingy with the 0.5, and we didn't give any of it out. So so when we come around to December 31, we could say, okay, we're off by 0.3% on the difference statistic, but we had a 0.5 reserved for unforeseen adjustments, and so we're going to continue to be stingy on unforeseen adjustments, but we're not going to make we're not going to do anything with our rates. You know, so that would be one scenario.
I'll also remind John that the 2% difference statistic, the calculated statistic that Jack actually calculated was 2.94. So the 2% already has a fair degree of conservatism built into it, just as a reminder.
But also, the different statistic was understated or overstated because of the concentrated reductions that we gave on the outpatient increases in the last 2 years. So there's some overstatement or understatement, however you want to look at it, in that different statistic.
There's a variation.
It was overstated.
There's a variation, and right. That's why you want
which brings it closer to 2%.
Right.
I'd just like to make an argument kind of on the other side. I don't like the implication that if we do better than expected, that we're then left with a pot of money that we can redistribute to the hospitals. I think if we come in under our 3.58%, that should be regarded as a good thing.
Yeah, I didn't actually hear myself say anything about.
No, you didn't, but I have heard that.
Well, and again, but I will also, again, the reason we have talked about, the hospital field has talked about that, it's very clear from the recommendations of the Advisory Council, which was a broad group of stakeholders to this commission. They were very concerned about not being, if you will, penny wise and pound foolish. That is, setting these rates so low that we achieve short-term success in hitting a financial target and long-term failure of the model because we don't make sufficient funding investments in the long-term future of this new model that's never been tried or tested on this magnitude or scale anywhere in the country, let alone in this state. And so I think it's an important message for us to keep in mind, and the Commission has done a good job of heeding that message by getting short of the changes for the uncompensated care and MHIP, have heard that message and I think addressed that with a recommendation that while it's not at the 3.58, it's at 3.41. So I think this is sensitive to that recommendation from the Advisory Council. We have to remember this is not just a one-year demonstration. This is a 5-year demonstration, and if we don't make enough investments up front in years 1 or year 2, we may find ourselves in year 3, 4, and 5 with a woefully underfunded system and a failure to achieve long-term success under all of the targets and goals. This is not just about saving money. It's about improving the quality of care. It's about the triple aim. And so while we could achieve success on one part of that triple aim, we could very easily fail on the other parts if we underinvest in this system. So that's why I was complimenting the staff, because I think they've done a good job of balancing that equation in the recommendation they're about to put forth. I did leave one thing out, however, and that's in that last section where I'd at least like to put a placeholder for the potential for doing an adjustment for a Medicaid assessment reduction. We do know that the uncompensated care reductions and the MHIP reductions do provide savings to all payers, including Medicaid, and to the extent that that provides general fund savings to Medicaid that were not anticipated in their budget for 2015, I'd like to at least have us place before the commissioners a placeholder, even if we don't have a calculation of that number at this point, for the fact that that could provide savings, it could reduce that assessment, and also contribute to achieving a greater level of Medicare savings as well. So I'm sorry I forgot that one of my earlier comments.
Okay. Yeah, so there is a provision in this year's state law that if Medicaid saves money under the new system, that there's some ability to release some of the deficit assessment. So Steve will have to look at that language to see, how that might come into play in terms of at least mentioning the thought process here.
It probably won't hit. It won't hit in 15. If anything, there'll be a lag. It could hit in 16 or later.
Well, again, I would just argue if the law allows you to do it in 15, that we at least put a placeholder here, just as we've done for the positive incentives of our readmissions program, which really don't come in until fiscal 16. But at least put a placeholder there, and I would then argue at least that if, when we do this mid-year review in January for other issues, that if there's the potential to reduce the assessment at that point over the balance of fiscal 15, we look to do it then and not have to wait a whole year to achieve additional savings for the Medicare program and other payers and hospitals if those savings are there.
And we'll take a look at the law, and I would just say that the Commission staff is concerned about infrastructure, and in particular care management infrastructure as one area that we're focused on determining how that should take place, and efficient models for care management, particularly for the Medicare population, where we really don't have well-developed care management infrastructure in the state. So, I think that's a continuing conversation. I wouldn't know how to fund that today, because I don't think the plan is really gelled for us to fund that at this point in time.
I would also add, in case there's any concerns about putting additional dollars into the infrastructure allowance, that in our global budget subgroup, template subgroup, there's clearly discussion been regarding the reporting format that hospitals would have for what they would do with those funds, both up front and then at the end of the year, so that if there's any concern about what hospitals would be doing with that, there will be a public reporting process that I think everyone would be able to see for how any of those funds, and including if we enhance it a little bit, how any of those funds would be used. So I feel confident that there's a little bit different process about how those funds might be spent than anything else.
And I just wanted to address one issue on the psychiatric hospitals, and then I'll open it up to other questions on the floor. But so the productivity adjustment is a general productivity adjustment. You're referring to the 0.2% ACA adjustment. And I think one of the other issues that we have to work through with the private with the psychiatric hospitals too are their bad debt adjustments, because they too will benefit from PAC, and we haven't really addressed that in a formal way yet. And we have tended to address the uncompensated care adjustments for those hospitals kind of, I would say, kind of on a one-off basis, if you will. So that'll be an area that we also have to address with them.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments?
Just for clarity on the cushion or the air bubble, whatever, it wouldn't, to Mike's point, once it became clear as you moved into the year that cushion could be used for infrastructure, part of infrastructure, if that was demonstrated as the highest need, correct, at that point?
Could it be?
It could be. It could be. It could be allocated to additional funding for infrastructure in, say, January 1, 2015. If that cushion is unexpected, and if it was warranted that the infrastructure had the highest need, some of that cushion could be dedicated to additional investments in infrastructure at that point, correct?
Maybe. I'm an accountant. My conservatism is great.
If Jerry could be convinced, I'm just trying to say it seems reasonable to have a cushion without dedicating. If you dedicate it up front, the cushion disappears because
6 months is a very short window for assessing how well we're doing. So I'm a little based on other people's experience with the getting the Medicare data and assessing it. I'm a little concerned about how fast we'll have our foot on the gas pedal to actually see how the numbers are coming in from Medicare. The ACOs are reporting a fairly slow ability to assess the data that's coming across the transom. And I know Care First has been dealing with the data too, and it seems fun.
Getting better, though. Getting much better.
Yeah, and I would just say that I have concerns about trying to commit to it in January, because also you have seasons in healthcare when your volumes tend to increase, and you haven't hit some of the winter months of everything too, when you might be seeing a greater utilization and maybe less efficient care, depending on the patient population that you got.
I wasn't really
right. We might actually
January was the target date, but the idea of preserving the cushion was my major point. That rather than committing anything additional for infrastructure at this point or shortly thereafter, maintaining a cushion for what unexpected contingencies seems pretty prudent.
Yeah, I mean, as an example of that, January and February this year, we had a lot of snow, and it actually suppressed utilization a little bit in the hospitals. So you wouldn't want to be counting on that and release cushion just because we had suppressed utilization this January and February.
And next year you may have a bad flu season where you got a lot of pneumonia admits.
And with I think it's something like a 30% reduction from good vaccinations, I think the whole system should be really making sure that people in bad health are getting vaccinations.
Yeah, but under this global model, we're still capped. So while I would agree we would not want to jump to a conclusion about what's happening with total volumes based on one bad month of trend and make some adjustments or for unforeseen adjustments up or down because of that, I would still remind folks that we have a total cap on volumes in this model. We've never had that before, and a total cap on total revenue growth. So unless we go to and get approval from CMMI for an adjustment to that global budget cap for those kinds of unexpected flu epidemics, we're locked in on this number for the entire year. And while I agree it is appropriate to allow some cushion for those kinds of unforeseen adjustments, what I'm suggesting is, at least up front, I think that 0.5% based on past history is probably a little high. And I also think that based on our past discussions with this work group,
So I guess we're finished with our agenda for the day. Good deal. Well, thank you, and as we said, we will be tweaking the uncompensated care recommendations a little bit based on what we described as the most recent PAC analysis, sending out PAC data, and we're willing to take comments via email since we weren't able to get these out in advance. So thank you very much.